your kid's like worst behavior where you were like embarrassed if it was in public or you like literally was like, that can't happen again. It was not within their control.
Hello. Good day to you, my friend. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. It's been such a busy week, so much running around. But I'm sitting down. I'm here. I'm happy to be here. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Yeah, I also feel kind of frenetic. Like it's been a really busy time and we've had a lot of intense meltdown moments this week. But I will say one of the biggest wins
That's a toddler for you.
Totally. I mean, my 3.5-year-old, but we've been reading this book about anger and he had a meltdown last night, like a really bad one. And we were talking about, I was like, okay, what does the book say? And then I remembered and I was like, okay, Oliver, how would you like to feel better? What would make you feel better? And then I went through the list of suggestions that the book had. Like, would you like to hit a pillow? Would you like to rip up some paper? Would you like to scream?
So
He's like, I want to rip paper. And I was like, okay. So then I'm like, shit, I was scrambling to find paper. I get him a piece of paper. He rips it up into a million pieces. He was so satisfied. I just sat there silently the whole time. And he was even so calm after that. He literally recycled it after. I was blown away.
Recycled.
And
that's so good.
I know. And it made me think of Laura. The timing, honestly, it was like the stars aligned because Laura is here today. Laura Petix is an amazing mother and a pediatric occupational therapist who we've had the joy to know for many years. She's also the mastermind behind the OT Butterfly. That's OT for occupational therapy, Butterfly. She's an expert in neurodiversity and sensory processing and helps parents better understand their child's sensory needs, behavior, and emotional regulation. She shares so many practical things on her Instagram. She's also an author. Laura is also a neurodivergent parent with ADHD and is raising a neurodivergent daughter with sensory sensitivities and anxiety. So she is living in the trenches with us, and we're so happy to have you. Welcome, Laura. Hi. We love you. We're so happy to see you and to talk to you and to learn from all of your great wisdom. I want to dive right in because I am in the thick of Meltdown City with my 3.5-year-old. And I want to know right away, can you help us understand what is happening when a child is melting down and they're having a tantrum and like what is going on inside their brains and their bodies?
I want to give you a virtual hug, and anyone listening, if you're in the thick of it, I know exactly where you're at right now. I am happy to say we are out the other side of it. I have a neurodivergent 8-year-old now who still has some pretty big emotions, but she has a little bit more executive functioning skills to play with now to express it in a different way. But when you're in the toddlerhood, preschool era, you're dealing with a mix of their emotional part of their brain is getting a makeover, like this rewiring. So there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't see. And sometimes those wires get crossed and extra sparked a little bit sometimes. So we've got this development piece there. And then for anyone listening, and I don't know, Melissa, about your kids, but anybody that also has maybe sensory processing stuff, sensory sensitivities and things like that, that layer on top of it kind of make this really like perfect storm, so to speak, of these really, really big meltdowns. And so what's happening in the brain, whether or not your child has sensory needs or not, is that they are operating from the really primal lower part of their brain, which is the survival part of the brain. And so the brain is perceiving a threat in the environment that could just be as dangerous as seeing a lion chase after you. And so the brain doesn't differentiate from like, mom told me no, but this also feels like a lion is chasing me. Like it's the equal response. And so you see those behaviors in a child that would elicit, fighting back, running away, screaming, crying, hitting, pulling hair, all of this stuff. What I want parents to know, and you, Melissa, to know, is that when they're already deep in this meltdown, there's no like red button. There's no magic stop. There's nothing that childhood experts are like gatekeeping and holding on to this like secret password that's like, if you say this, it's going to stop. We don't have that. It doesn't work like that. So it's really out of their control in this moment. And if we know that their nervous system and their brain is feeling threatened and unsafe, we want to try to help their nervous system and body feel safe. And that can look so different for kids. But what I can say is that more words and a lot of questions and raising our voice and repeating things that we've already said is really not what's going to help their nervous system and brain feel safe, even though that's where we tend to respond from.
That resonates so much. And my son is not necessarily diagnosed with any sensory sensitivities, but I know from just being his mom that loud noises really bother him. Like if the coffee grinder is on or the fire alarm at the daycare is a big traumatic thing that happens every month. And when those things pile up, it all just makes it much worse. And one thing that we've been trying to figure out is like, what are the unlocks for him specifically to help pull him out of it? It's almost like if he's having a night terror, you can't really get them out of it, but there's like, you can just be there to hold them and support them until they get to the other side. When we're thinking about behavior through this sensory lens, like what does that even mean? And then how can we consider those things? Like if for just as an example for people, like let's say the fire alarm went off at the daycare. My son gets home and I say, hey, Oliver, before dinner, can you wash your hands, please? And he starts rolling around on the floor, crying and screaming and saying no. And it's like this big, big catastrophe. I know it's not because I asked him to wash his hands. It's because it's the buildup of the day. And then maybe later that night, I'll find out it was fire alarm day. And so thinking about the sensory and how that all plays into the behavior, are there tools that we can kind of pull from as parents that will help almost like neutralize our child when they're coming home from somewhere where we might not have even been and know what happened, or somewhere where we're like, okay, we just got home from a 4-year-old's birthday party and everyone's very like up and high strung. And like, are there some tools that you can help share with us? And what does this all really mean?
The framework to help parents understand how to support their kids is to think of your child's nervous system as having different sized sensory cups. And what Melissa is describing is, feeling overwhelmed by sounds and having a busy day at school. I think it's a pretty fair assessment to say that most kids are experiencing a lot of sensory input in their day, in their classroom, especially if they're in a traditional classroom or daycare setting. And so if we think of that as every sound, every chair screech when you tuck in the chair, every unzip, every smell of everyone's lunch, every sensation of swinging, every sensation of bumping into a kid and glue getting into our fingers, all of those little sensory kind of stimuli throughout the day are adding little drops into our imaginary sensory cup. Some kids have a smaller cup for certain kinds of things, like for sound or for touch, than other kids. And so if we think about the sensory cup after a full day of school, it's either like full to the very top or, overflowing. And so what we see when we get home, when we so rudely ask them to wash their hands, how dare us ask them to wash their hands, another thing that's out of their control, potentially a little add to their sensory cup of, even if they like playing with water, maybe the soap and the water at the sink at the end of the day was just the last drop to their sensory cup. And it really is like, that was it. So we want to think of it as like an accumulation of sensory input from the day. Now, there are some kids who might have a symbolically large sensory cup, meaning they can tolerate a lot more than some kids. And maybe they might not have had enough sensory input at school. Maybe they needed a lot more movement than they got. I will say, though, that even a lot of my kids who have big, large sensory cups and love to get messy and love to move around and swing and rough and tumble, school settings can still be just across the board quite overwhelming. So I think it's fair to just at least enter this, if you don't know which sensory profile your child has, from the approach of assuming that they need some unwinding time after school, like immediately after school, that first, from the minute you pick them up to maybe like the 30 minutes to an hour after, of trying to sort of dip out from their sensory cup. And the way that we would dip out from their sensory cup could be a few things. I'll share what works for my daughter, but I'll also call out some other options. So for my daughter, she has more of a small sensory cup. So I know I need to kind of like dip out from it right after school. One of the sensory cups my daughter has that's small is for her interoception, which is like her ability to notice hunger and thirst and all of those things. So when she's hungry, even if it's the slightest bit hungry, it's like it feels like she hasn't eaten in days, and everybody knows. So I know right away to meet her after school with a safe preferred snack. As soon as she gets in the car, I'm like handing her, a granola bar or a smoothie. So that's number one. Number two, I don't ask a lot of questions after school. I will like give her a nice warm greeting and say, I hope you had a good day. And I just zip my mouth until she shares what she wants to share. I'm someone who's very curious, asks a lot of questions. I have to hold that in.
That's so hard.
It's so hard because we want to know, how did that test go? What did you do at recess? Did you get to go to this? Oh my God, I saw you walking out with your friend. We need to remember, like, try to think of, for parents who have a hard time getting in this space, if you've ever had a little bit too many to drink the night before, you've been really sick, you have like the worst headache, and you like don't want to talk, you want to like shrivel up into your hoodie and no sunglasses on, like literally no one talk to me. Like imagine that like after school. We're minimizing the extra auditory input, got a snack, we get home, and that first 20 to 30 minutes, I create an environment that allows her to do whatever play or activity that she likes to do that's not homework. She actually likes doing homework. I got lucky with that. But I try to let her, read a fun book. But I dim the lights or have no overhead lights at all. Sometimes she's in her room. We've got a pop-up tent or a swing that she can be in. I kind of ask what her body needs. But again, I'm limiting extra verbal input and things like that. And now you might have a child who comes home and needs more swinging, needs more jumping and moving because they had to sit at a desk for too long at the school, depending on what their age is. But first and foremost, those first few minutes after school, snack, silence, let them lead the conversation. And then at home, try to see what their body needs more of.
Mm-hmm. That is so incredibly helpful and so relatable as well. My two boys are now 7 and 9, and my oldest has always been a very sensory specific kid. So on the one hand, he can really tolerate a lot of the twirling, the spinning, the jumping, somersaults, trampoline play, all of that fun stuff. On the other hand, I have to be very careful in the morning to give him the right pair of socks. It's not about the edges of the socks. It's about sometimes it's too tight, sometimes it's too loose, and so he wants them. It's always a balance. I also know that when summer's over and we have to transition from shorts to long pants, from t-shirts to sweaters, always a thing. Every year, all over, at this point, I'm mentally prepared that and I know to prepare him, we're gonna have to start wearing longer pants soon. So we try that out over the weekend, so there's no pressure for him to put it on before we have to go to school. I do not introduce long pants or long sleeve sweaters on a school morning. What are some everyday situations, mornings, getting out the door for school time, getting up out of bed even, meals, bedtime, bath time? What are some hidden sensory challenges that parents might not realize are sensory challenges and could help them in that mindset shift, going from my child is being difficult to, oh, my child is having a hard time?
I could go through every aspect of the day and kind of call out common behaviors that I see in my child and also the ones that I consult in families with. So like you said, right in the morning, some families, this could be the hardest time of their day, especially when you have to get out the door somewhere. I think families that homeschool or children who get to stay home and don't have daycare or anything have a little bit more leeway. But even before I had to get anywhere, mornings used to be hard for us too. So what you want to think about is that, how we always talk about transitions and how transitions can be hard from going from one activity to the next. What we also forget about is that actually waking up, going from sleep to awake is a transition in your nervous system, right? You're switching from the parasympathetic activation, which is the rest and digest. That's what allows you to sleep. And then it's starting to activate your sympathetic nervous system to get up and start moving throughout the day. For some kids, that transition can be really jarring. It's too much of a switch and not a gradual. And that can not feel good in their body, especially kids who are sensitive to interoception. So when they notice their heart is beating fast, when they overheat, when their stomach feels a certain way, when their breath rate is a certain way, they notice that and it doesn't feel good to them. Now, these kids are not saying, I don't like the way my heart feels. They're just reacting in a way as if like their sympathetic nervous system, right? So that can start the morning off hard in a way. Another transition that I see often is just the temperature transition. Getting out of bed, changing into new clothes, that transition of warm to cold.
Oh no, that's me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's me when I was a kid. What the?
Yes. Yeah. If you have wood floors or tile floors, that, and like I said, they're not making this easy for us. They're not calling out every single trigger for us and saying, I don't like the way that feels. Because, if my daughter said the floor is too cold, I would give her house slippers. I would put socks up. But they're not saying that. They make us work for this. They make us really decode their behavior. So those are really small hidden ones. Then with everything else, getting ready for school, all of the hygiene tasks, especially if your child is still dependent in you supporting them, this is like brushing their hair, putting sunscreen on, brushing their teeth, helping them wipe if they go to the bathroom. All of those things are the touch sense, but what makes it trickier is it's imposed. So it's not in their control because like we're wiping their face for them. We're putting the lotion on. And that can be a little bit harder for them to tolerate, right? Like, have you ever like tried to like tickle yourself and it's not as ticklish as when someone else tickles you? Right? It's like the same,
exactly.
It's the same thing. So it's when it's someone else, it's way different. So there's that piece, the hygiene piece. There's, of course, the getting dressed piece. That's a huge, really, really common one. For school, you have to wear a certain shoe. You have to have closed-toed. Some kids have to wear uniform. All of these things that one is not in their control. Two, uniforms and some school clothes are more itchy. They're not sensory friendly. So that can be tricky too. Breakfast, if you got a picky eater. And some kids aren't hungry in the morning. And like I skip breakfast now as an adult. I'm not ready to eat within the first 20 minutes that I'm awake. Yet we wake up kids and then breakfast is ready and they've got to eat. And we're like, get more protein, have this. You're not going to, all of those things.
That's literally me every morning.
Yeah.
I'm like, you've got to eat. And he's like, no.
Yeah, no, thank you. And there's sounds and all of that stuff, right? So those are some of the subtle things, like just in the very tippy top in the morning. And then when you layer on rushing, the act of like, let's go, we only have a few more minutes, that can really do a number on the nervous system. Like it really can be perceived as a threat at school, dinner time and bedtime, the bathroom and bath time, transitioning into the bath. I hated getting into the bath and the shower. I still really dread showering. But once I'm in the shower, it feels great. And then I can't get out. Like I'm standing there for like ever in the warm. Yeah, it's the transition with the temperature. And then into pajamas. Like there's just a lot of actual transitions. And it's not, for sensory kids specifically, it's not just transitioning from a preferred to a non-preferred, which is what we talk a lot about in the kids' world. And like stopping something fun to do something not fun. Absolutely, that's part of it. But we don't always take into consideration the sensory transitions from room to room, sounds, smells, feelings, and all of that.
I have a question for you, Laura. How do we know what is sensory? What is a sensory sensitivity that we should really support and be mindful of and really prioritize for our kid, and what is not? Like, I mean, I think about this a lot with my own parents who babysit for us quite regularly. And they're like, they're fine. Like you guys are coddling them. And I feel like this is also a generational thing.
It's for sure a generational thing.
How do I know if my son who doesn't want to eat breakfast is having, actually, no, let me give you a better example. I got him these new pants. They're the best pants ever. Yet he will not go near them because he doesn't like the feel of the pants. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I'm like, are you having a sensory issue here? Or have you just decided you don't like these pants because you're dealing with another issue that's bothering you and you're using the pants as an excuse? And like, what do I do with that? I mean, should I have him diagnosed for a sensory sensitivity? Should I just kind of take it as face value and try again the next day? Do I burn the pants? Like how do we think about this?
Oh yeah. I wish that we could just like have like a superpower to like literally like x-ray vision and see what's going on into their brain and like inside out basically, and be able to know like what's what hill am I going to die on today? Like, what do I actually have power over, right? And it's always remembering, like, what can I actually control right now? Chances are you can't control a lot of what your child does. We can only set up the environment. We can only encourage them to do certain things. So in terms of prioritizing, like, do I need to worry about this? Usually what I tell parents is, if it's something sudden, like all of a sudden, like it's like, well, like you were fine with those pants yesterday, today you don't, or it's like something new. I would say, like, don't panic right away. Like, kids, like, we've went through a million different phases of things she loved, things she hated. So if it's within like a few weeks and it's new and it's like one specific thing, like one pants, like, fine, whatever, I'll give this to you. We have other pants. It's not a big deal, right? But if it's like constant, like your child you can't find a pair of pants at all that work for your child specifically. Like, they say everything feels uncomfortable, or it like prohibits them from participating in something. Like, if he couldn't tolerate any pair of shoes at all, and you can't even work around that, you can't go places because he won't wear shoes. Yeah, that's more of a, like, we have to work on this right now. And it's more than just accommodating. Right. So we always want accommodations to be part of the picture. What can I make easier for my child so they can be successful now? Like, if I took stimulation away, if I gave them this sensory friendly piece of clothing, if I held them down the slide instead of just expecting them to do it by themselves, can they be successful with accommodations? If so, let's go with that for now and let their nervous system feel safe, and keep an eye on what other areas of life this might be impacting. If you're starting to collect data of like, well, okay, the pants are not that hard, but at school, every time I pick him up, like, he's not bringing home artwork. Then I ask the teacher, and the teacher says, oh yeah, they don't do art. Oh, okay, well, he's not doing art. Okay, well, I've also noticed when we go to the playground, he's like not really wanting to like be in the sand area. And even if his friends are there, and now he's like sitting with me instead of playing with his friends. Okay, well, that might be something too. So if you're starting to like collect these little pieces of data in multiple environments and or multiple kind of parts of your day, right? So even if it just affects you at home and not at school in the library, it can still be worth looking into, especially if it's like, it's pants, but he also only eats like 10 kinds of food. And it takes us like an hour to get out of the bath, and there's always screaming and crying. Like, when you're collecting a lot of those things and it's starting to really disrupt or impact your day, even with accommodations for those things that you can accommodate, right? And for some things that you can't accommodate or the accommodations are not enough, it's certainly worth it to get an evaluation from an occupational therapist.
That is just gold. And also very reassuring for me. And I'm sure a lot of people listening about, where their kids sit on this spectrum of being sensitive and managing their emotions and going through the highs and lows of the day, because we go through it too, of course. I mean, and in the middle of I was going to say breakdown, but I mean, for me, it's a breakdown. But I mean, for my kids, like in the middle of a meltdown. I mean, you touched on this a little bit before, but I want to come back to it because I think it's so top of mind for parents of young children who have these massive emotions of like, what is the best thing we can do when our child's having a meltdown to support them, to also stay regulated ourselves?
This is going to look different for every family, depending on the age of your child and whether or not they are autistic, have ADHD, have sensory issues, anxiety, because some of them will want stimulation during the meltdown. Some of them will want to be hugged tight and rocked and want you there. Others will not. So I would really try to take inventory. If your child has constant meltdowns, sit down and like list out the things that they really, really hate and don't like during a meltdown. Like, every time I ask a question, they scream more. Every time I hand them something to squeeze, they throw it at me. Anytime I try to hug them, they push me off. So we're trying to collect kind of clues and saying, okay, so it seems like my child wants to be alone or at least have space. Number one, right? So we're kind of collecting that and try to embody that as much as we can during the meltdown. And I stress as much as we can because so many factors affect this. If we're in public, if we have siblings, if they're hurting themselves or hurting us, we can't always leave them alone or give them space. That's the extreme. That's a lot of neurodivergent kids' meltdowns. The meltdowns my daughter had required like physical hands-on tight bear hug because she would bite her fingers and then bang her head. So I couldn't leave her alone. So really trying to nail down what their behaviors are during the meltdown and what of those things you can provide for them in an optimal environment. And then, really, I am saying this now, but when I was in the thick of it, I like scrolled past or shut the book or turned off the podcast when they would talk about meltdowns, and they would say it's really best if you can try to prevent it or work before rather than what you can do in the moment. I hated that because I'm like, well, obviously I'm trying to prevent it as much as I can, but I can't everything. And that's like genuinely, that's really, we have to accept that. That's what it is. There's really nothing. So as the caregiver, one of my favorite things to do is try to support my posture. What I mean by that is leaning back up against a chair, leaning up against a wall, sometimes sitting on the ground up against the wall. Sometimes I'm sitting outside her door. But when you can support your posture and you don't have to think about standing up or moving or holding your muscles up, that can be a cue to your nervous system that you're safe. And that's already one piece of like, we need as many cues of safety as possible because our kids' nervous system is telling them they're unsafe. Our kids' behavior is telling our nervous system that we're unsafe because the screams, the cryings, we got to go somewhere. I got something else I have to do. I'm overheating. I'm stressed out. Your nervous system feels unsafe too. So to give it cues of safety, we can support the posture, whether you're laying down on the ground, sitting up against a wall. You can hold some ice cubes or something cold to your neck or to your hands if you have access to that. I'm going to say it. I know people roll their eyes also, but it's the deep breathing. I hated this also. So I will also admit that. I really, really hated when people told me to take a deep breath until I learned specific deep breathing stuff that actually felt more structured than just take a breath, right? Like when there was a structure to it and a second count, that helped. Mantras are great too. I personally like to focus on my sympathetic activation system. So when I'm panicking or witnessing a meltdown, my heart is beating so fast. I truly just put my hand on my heart and try to slow it down. What can I do to slow it down? Closing my eyes, not moving for a second. And then if I could even look at my Apple Watch and watch my heart rate decrease, that feedback is already just calming my nervous system. Earplugs, headphones, if your kids are really loud, that might help you as well. Yeah, those are all some of my like survival kit tools for a parent if you can access those at home.
Oh my God, these are all so great. I use half of them. Like the other day,
Great.
I was feeling super dysregulated or tired because I had been sitting at my desk all day. So I just, my kids were gaming on the couch and watching TV. And I was just like, I went there and I just laid down on my rug for like 5 minutes. And I was like putting my arms up and down, like kind of like I needed that like input like on my back.
On your back.
Like I needed something. Yeah, exactly. That was so helpful. I'm really trying to teach my kids these things as well. One of them had like, they both have like different sensory cups because obviously they're different kids. But I'm trying to already like preemptively, well, I say preemptively, but like they're 7 and 9. Like I've been trying to teach them these skills for years, like help them regulate their buzz. I remember doing like when they were feeling angry, I would have them jumping on the couch, or like I was like, do you want to do somersaults on my legs, where I would hold their hands and help them flip over, but where like they would run up my body. And that often helped them because it moved them out of their minds and into their bodies and kind of like made them forget what they were so mad about, or that's what it felt like to me. What are like some other things that parents can do to help their kid build that regulation, like build those self-regulation skills, so kids can also feel like they have these tools in their back pockets? Because I'm sure that like you can't just like when your child is having a meltdown, you're like, okay, let's take a couple of deep breaths. Yeah. But if they've never done that before, like that's not gonna work on them. So I know that you have to like teach them beforehand when they're all like calm.
Exactly. So teaching them the strategies beforehand at neutral times is key to making any of this successful. But some of the strategies that you mentioned are really good because what you're doing is you're Yes, we call it a distraction, but it's not just like, it's not the distraction and like, ooh, look what's over there. Like, don't worry about that. Like, look over there. We're not trying to just like make them laugh or forget. What we're doing is we're giving their brain another sensory experience to focus on. So we're bringing their focus to their body, which is essentially self-regulation. So sometimes tumbling can help. For some kids, it's we want to think of like kind of big and bold bursts of sensory input. So I think of cold, again, one of my favorite ones is the ice throwing trick that a lot of people like doing. So I always have a bowl of ice cubes ready, especially the first week after school. Throwing them outside on the concrete is a great option. The visual feedback, the crashing of the ice, and then the cold sensation is just enough to kind of have them focus really on the sensory experience of something else. Especially if your kid is an aggressive kid and they like to throw, then give them a yes zone to throw. So ice is good. If your child can handle it, like sour candy or mints, again, not when they're fully melting down because we don't want a choking hazard, or if you help them lick a candy cane or a sour lollipop or even sour drops, they have sour sprays, something like that. That kind of big, bold, intense flavor, again, can really kind of like be a jolt to the nervous system and kind of recenter what it's focusing on. And then once they're there, then we can say, now let's take a deep breath together. Let's sip some ice cold water. Let's squeeze our hands together. We're just really telling our brain to notice these parts of the body and notice where our body is. And if you need help, I'm going to give you clues to where your body is by squeezing, by having a sip of water, and all of those kinds of like pinpointed sensory experiences throughout the body.
Everything you're saying, by the way, is just really resonating for me. And I'm so excited to take some of these tools back to my family. But I want to know, when you're in a group setting with a bunch of kids and they're all playing together, and one kid pushes the other who starts hitting the other, and there's this like chain reaction of behavior. Sometimes for us, we live near a beach, so it's often throwing sand. One kid will throw sand at the other kid, who will then throw sand at the next kid, and then everyone's throwing sand. And I want to know about your thoughts on things like timeouts when it comes to this behavior. And I feel like the timeout concept has become very controversial lately. And I have some friends who do timeouts. I have friends who don't believe in timeouts. And then I also have the experience that at our daycare, they give the kids thinking time. So they'll like remove them from the situation and call it thinking time. I think the core idea here is just to pull your child out of a situation to give them the opportunity to re-regulate and reflect. And that way you can talk to them about behavior that's perhaps not okay, or bring them back to their breath and try to regulate them, because often I think kids are also sometimes just the recipient and they get stuck in it. But can you talk to us a little bit about like group dynamics with young kids, especially that behavior piece, and then your thoughts on taking this sort of timeout or break and separating your child from others?
Yeah, so it is really tricky when you're in a group of kids and one behavior sets off kind of a chain reaction, or even if it's just one kid but reacting to a bunch of kids in the situation. I think first and foremost, again, the adult's job and responsibility is to step in and make sure no one gets hurt. Like, we have to stop that. We're not letting that play out, especially when there's other people's kids. If this is how you handle with your siblings, like, and you take the approach of you kind of let them hash it out, that's what you get to decide for your family. But if we're talking about like we're playing with cousins and neighbors and friends and all of those things, certainly step in and make sure that no one can get hurt. Sometimes that means separating all of the kids and like one adult takes that set, this adult takes that. Sometimes it means removing one child from the group for a specific reason, right? But always first and foremost, stepping in and stopping that behavior. I'm going to jump to the end and then we'll go back to my ideas about timeout. At the end of whatever you do, I always, especially if it's in a group thing, it's important to facilitate repair between the kids, right? And so repair is not necessarily say sorry to all the other kids. It's repairing is like when you accidentally break something and you like tape it back together or you glue it back together. It's a mistake and things are fixable. So we want them to know that friendships and the dynamics in friendships, we can make mistakes, we can hurt people's feelings, we can even hurt our friends on accident. or on purpose for some kids. And it's still repairable. It's still something we can fix. And we should fix that because we care about them and we want to keep playing with them. So we want to teach them this idea of repair. And that can look different, again, for every kid. When my daughter was really young, when she would do this with either my husband or myself, where she would, because she doesn't have siblings, she would like either hit us or do something that was not okay. She would repair. And her form of repair was she used to like scribble little pictures and draw it on, put it under our door, or ask for a hug, or bring the remote control and want to show us a scene on like Daniel Tiger, like sharing a shared experience. For kids, it could say, can I get you an ice pack? Can I get you a Band-Aid? Are you okay? Do you want to rebuild the sandcastle with me? Can I rebuild the tower that I broke for you? We can do something that you want to do this time. Like just coming up with different ways to repair that relationship with that child. Sometimes it is an apology. Sometimes the child will say, I want you to say sorry, then sure. But if we can help kids repair what happened, sometimes we get a redo, sometimes we get a replay of what happened. But that can look different. Now, in the sense of like the timeout situation. So this all just, you can rebrand timeout a million ways. It's called time in, it's called reflection time, it's called thinking time. And I think the difference is in the delivery and how we are presenting it to the child. If it's go sit in the corner and think about what you've done, you can call that thinking time. That is timeout. If we are intentionally isolating the child by themselves and not helping them through it, right, that's not helpful. If the child is saying with their body, like, I need space, I'm overstimulated, so I'm pushing all these kids away, it looks like your body wants some space right now. Let me walk you over to that side of the classroom and you could hug this bear and I'll come check in you. That's not a timeout. That's you wanted some space. I know you like that safe space in the corner. And I know you like this bear. So it's really nuanced, right? If I was at the beach and, had to remove the child from the group, I'm not going to say, go sit in that tent by yourself. I say, why don't we go for a walk and throw some shells in the water? It looks like your body really needs to throw. And we'll dig our feet in the sand. So it's adult guided kind of reflection, but it's not with the intent of punishing them. So we always really want to focus on more on like connecting with them if possible. Again, if they're in a state where they are like not being able to take in any auditory instruction, they're unsafe, that's going to call for a different approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was super helpful. And I think a lot of parents can relate to like the timeout stuff for your kids who are not doing timeout. Like it is definitely a controversial topic.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on something else really quickly. Like I feel like we've talked so much about like sensory sensitivities and everything in this episode so far. From my perspective, I feel like a lot of parents think that the sensory strategies are only for kids on the neurodiverse spectrum. And like if your kid is not on the neurodiverse spectrum, that like they're just being difficult. Like what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would remind parents that we all have nervous systems. Everybody, every child, every adult, every parent, teacher, grandparent, cousin, aunt, uncle, mailman, whatever. We all have a nervous system. And all of our nervous systems exist in an environment with sensory input. So we all have our own very unique set of sensory needs and things that our nervous system feels good, like we like, things that we don't really care for, and things that we really, really dislike. And maybe some things that we need a lot more of constantly. The difference is, and so I will say, sensory strategies can be used for every person. And there's probably at least a handful of sensory strategies that everybody uses. They just don't know that it's a sensory strategy, right? And so they can apply for every person and every child. And even if a behavior is not sensory driven, a sensory strategy can still benefit the behavior. So you don't have to worry of like, oh, like that feels like that's too much for sensory kids. Like my kid's not. Sensory strategies are like universal language for the nervous system. So it can help all kids. It's just really understanding what your child needs more of and really doesn't need a lot of.
That makes sense.
If you could give everyone listening one shift or mindset that you'd love for people to take away from this episode, what would be?
I don't know that this is as much of a groundbreaking mindset shift right now, but I would just like to remind folks, if they're in this space, to remember that really your kids' like worst behavior, imagine like the worst behavior they've ever shown, where you were like embarrassed if it was in public, or you like literally was like, that can't happen again. It was not within their control. Like 1,000%, the most dysregulated you've ever seen your child was not in their control. And I would go further to say that most, if not all, behaviors of children are a state of their nervous system. So again, not within their immediate control. We can teach them the skills to help regulate those things and maybe have more space between a trigger and a reaction. But once their nervous system is triggered, that's out of everybody's control. That's the way that their brain and nervous system is wired. So just keeping that in mind, I think, can go a long way in supporting our kids.
You're so wise. Wow. You really ended on a high note there. Thank you so much, Laura. We've known you for many years, and we've talked about all of this stuff many times. But every time we talk, I learn so much from you, and genuinely can't wait to take some of these strategies to my son like in an hour when I go pick him up from daycare. Thanks again, Laura. We really appreciate you being here.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
This was such an insightful chat.
So much good stuff.
Especially when it came to managing meltdowns. If this resonates with you as a parent and you feel like you could use even more wisdom from Laura, go check her out on socials at the OT Butterfly. That's at the letters O and T Butterfly on Instagram, or theotbutterfly.com. There are so many good snippets and tips and tricks that we both learn from every day, whether you have a child on the spectrum or not, who's neurodiverse or not, who has sensitivities or not. I think every child could benefit from some emotional support, and Laura is the master. Okay, and that's the pod. But please don't go anywhere yet. Don't press any buttons. Before you go, we want to remind you that We're Doing Great is brought to you by Puck, an award-winning company reimagining how kids play and learn using technology. If you appreciated this episode, please give us 5 stars so other parents can come find us too. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Come find us on Instagram and TikTok at We're Doing Great Pod. We would love to talk to you and learn from you and just chat and be friends. And until then, don't forget, you're doing great.